this or something better for the highest good. And so I would write about how badly I wanted a partner and how badly I wanted a family. And I couldn't imagine that there was something better, something greater. To me, that was just it. I just want to be a mom. I just want to be partnered. I just want to have the white picket fence. Like I want what other people seem to have so easily. And it is so incredible to look back and just see like, this is it. This is the something better for the higher good. I am so happy and so fulfilled. My son is so happy. I mean, I have women tell me this child that I'm holding would not be in my arms if I hadn't found your community. And I just can't think of anything better.
Hey there, fellow rebels. Welcome to #ActuallyICan, the podcast where we say a hearty hell yes to designing life on our own terms. I'm Katie Ripp, a lifestyle coach, business mentor, and serial entrepreneur, here to guide you through the wild ride of defying what society expects of us and embracing our authenticity. On this show, we dive deep into taboo topics like death, money, spirituality, entrepreneurship, unapologetic self-care, and personal development, all while swearing and laughing along the way. Expect down and dirty conversations, plenty of humor, and a whole lot of exploration, leaving you feeling empowered to be your truest self. Whether you're craving a good laugh, seeking unconventional self-care tips, or simply looking for some camaraderie, you've come to the right place. We only get this one short life, so buckle up and let's design yours on our own terms. Ready to dive in? Let's go. Okay, welcome back to another episode of #ActuallyICan. I am your host, Katie Ripp, and today we are actually diving into a story about resilience and choice and redefining what motherhood can look like. We don't talk about motherhood a lot on this podcast, so it's an interesting guest for us. And she is incredible. Katie Bryan is a mindset coach, a community facilitator, and the inspiring host of the Single Greatest Choice podcast. By the way, great name.
Thank you.
Such a good name for all of it. So she is here to share her journey really from societal expectations of becoming a solo mom, right? Like a thriving solo mom by choice. And she's built a really amazing community for women navigating solo motherhood by choice. So Katie, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I love doing interviews like this with people that aren't familiar with this lifestyle choice. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I am really fascinated by this. And we also, we're both Katies, so Katies of the world rejoice.
Yes.
And we both have sons named Miles. So that's very exciting. Okay, so your story is so powerful. I just really want you to dive into it. I want you to tell me all about it, right? Start from the beginning, because I really am a believer of the obstacle is the way. Mm-hmm. And this couldn't be truer in your case, I think, right? You just took your story, took your obstacle and made it not only your purpose, but also a livelihood.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful you're here and talking about this. I cannot wait to listen to your Actually I Can moment.
Yeah.
But please just start at the beginning. I'm just going to let you go.
Thank you so much, Katie. And just knowing the mission and kind of the message behind your podcast, even as you're telling my story to me, I'm starting to kind of tear up because it is so true that the obstacle has been the way. And it's just still daily blows my mind that I'm living the life that I'm living, because this is not what I meant to do with my life. But it's amazing. It's far more amazing than anything I could have dreamed up for myself. So super happy with where I landed. But it was the long road to get here. So I'm happy to tell you about it.
They always are, right? Those yellow brick roads are not necessarily just paved with gold.
Yeah. So I live in Texas, and I think that's part of the story because just, traditional kind of Southern, the expectation was you get married to a man, preferably while you're young, you pop out babies before you're 30. That was just kind of, and then career or anything else was just an add-on. But of course I was going to get married and have kids. No one asked, do you think you want to get married or do you think you will get married? That was the assumption. It was going to happen, right? And I did. Mm-hmm. I felt like I checked that box. I was on top of things, and I got married at 23, which is very young, but at the time it made sense. I was graduating from grad school and got married, and, we were so young. We didn't know what we didn't know. Mm-hmm. And after a few years, he just was really struggling with various kind of wishing life looked different. He really wanted to pursue music as a career. He just realized he really wasn't ready to settle down, which was an inconvenient realization 5 years into a marriage. But he wanted to go kind of sow his wild oats. and had told me he was not interested in having children and he wasn't sure if he was interested in owning a home anymore. And he just kind of wanted to like throw it all away. And that was not the life that I was looking for. So we divorced before I was 30. And I think at the time I was a bit relieved because I could see all along how, even though I deeply loved this person, like we just weren't a great match for our goals and our values and things like that. And so I think I just thought from here, I get a do-over and like marriage 2.0 will be better and like a better fit. And, you know, I still have very like kind thoughts towards my first husband, my only husband at this point. Yeah. But it just wasn't a match. And so I went on to date and I think I was very hopeful. And I even considered, I remember looking back, like I even considered not changing my name back to my maiden name because I thought, well, in a few years, I'll be remarried and then I'll change my name to that.
Oh, so interesting. I have such a interesting philosophy. I'm always shocked when people get divorced that they don't change back their name. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I got divorced, I would just go back to who I was before. But there's so many layers to that part, especially if you have children, right? Like you want the same last name as your children or whatever that case is. But that part of it is just also fascinating to me.
Exactly. So, well, and at this time, I've been divorced 3 times as long as I was ever married. I was married for 5 years. I've been divorced for 15 years. So thank goodness. I mean, eventually I would have changed my name back, but I'm glad I just did it right up front. So anyway, I dated. I was engaged again at a point I think was in my mid 30s, and that just I could see that was really just me kind of hitting a point where I was really freaking out about being behind and, you know, my fertility and less so. I wasn't really looking at my actual like fertility numbers at that time. I was pretty naive about all of that. I think at the time I just was like, I'm behind. My friends are married. My friends are having kids. Yeah. I need to lock this down. And I ended up dating a man who was much older than me, who already had a child who was 7, who was around the age of a lot of my friends' kids. So it was like, I got to kind of like skip a step.
Yeah. It also checked a box, right?
Yes. But ultimately it just wasn't the right fit. I mean, we were pretty close to, we had sent out save the dates. I had a wedding dress and a venue and all of that. And I just was like, you know, I don't think this is going to last. Like, I just knew that I was going to be lonelier in that relationship than I would be. I just felt like my only hope of feeling like I truly was partnered would be to find a different partner. And I was really loved that man and was hopeful basically that I could fix him with my love. Yeah.
I don't laugh at you. I hope I'm laughing with you because like that kind of statement is so common.
Right. And so I think I was around 34, 35 at the time that relationship ended. And I still was extremely hopeful, and not even hopeful, but just like certain that my person would come along. And at this point, dating apps had come out. And, you know, the first time when I got divorced, it was all like Match.com, like online dating was a thing, but it was only desperate people did that. So I didn't do it the first time around. I was like,
I mean, I'm also in that generation that like, it's weird for us, right? Like online dating is the way to do it now, but it was not that way when we were younger, right? Like it was desperate.
Right. The first time around, I was like, absolutely not. And so instead I joined every like run club and volunteer organization. And I was just hustling. And I'm such an introvert, but I was out every night of the week, just like, not even necessarily trying to meet men, but trying to meet like girlfriends who might know someone, or just like networking my way to a relationship, which was exhausting. And I eventually did end up meeting the guy that I was engaged to that way. But then when I was single again and dating apps were a thing, at first I was a little resistant, then I gave it a try. And then it was like what everyone was doing. And then it was wild because I would see people on apps that were the same people that I like, oh, I recognize that guy from the gym, or that's a friend of a friend that I know. So it was like the other ways I would have met people, I was also seeing those same exact people on dating apps.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did a ton of dating. I think at a certain point, I became so anxious about the timeline and the calculation of like, okay, if this goes well, and then let's say we date for like 6 months to a year, and then this and that, we move in, and that, like, I was constantly doing that math. And I kept hitting up against, and then I'll be 40. And 40 was totally freaking me out. So I think my 36th or 37th birthday was when I really started to think I should explore what my fertility actually looks like. And egg freezing was new. Not a lot of people were doing it. It became non-experimental in 2012, and I got divorced in 2010. So egg freezing, you know, it was around, but it was something that like celebrities were doing, or people were doing for medical reasons because they were going through chemotherapy or things like that. It just wasn't something that an average income woman was.
Yeah, it wasn't like an elective, right? Like it was sort of a luxury.
LA and New York and places like that,
Yeah.
but not in Austin,
That's
Texas.
sort of fascinating. Did you say 2012 it became non-experimental?
Yes.
Like, think about how fast we've come, right?
Yeah.
Like in 13 years, we've like completely flipped the script.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. And so,
Wow.
it's still kind of like the dating app thing. It felt like a thing I would do if I were desperate. It just felt like any minute I'm going to meet someone and then I will have like quote unquote wasted $10,000, which is how much it cost at the time, or maybe more than that. And so I didn't do it. And then eventually I met someone who was amazing and at the same time decided to do an at-home fertility test that was like I think I saw an ad on Facebook or something. So I bought this little kit where you prick your finger and you mail in this sample. And when I got my results, had gone on just a handful of dates with this person. But my results indicated that I was in the average range, but like right at the line of diminished and average. So not even like solidly average fertility for my age. And my age was not great. I think I was 37 at the time.
I mean, the way you're talking about it is like, you can't see my face, but I'm just cringing. Like, so just another thing we're fucking scored on.
Yes,
And
yes.
not great or average or like, can we just have our eggs?
And I'm so grateful actually though that it came out that way, because had it been even just like a millimeters closer to the like into the average range, I don't think I would have been as alarmed because I had just met someone, and I think I would have kind of ignored it. But instead, this inspired me to go into an actual reproductive endocrinology doctor and get like actual numbers from a doctor versus this at-home kit, and to start exploring egg freezing. And I did decide to do a round of egg freezing while I was in this new relationship, just because I knew even if I do end up with this person, it's, we just met. So I need some time. And it felt like a smart thing to do. And I think had it gone like quote unquote well, like I didn't know at the time what a good result would be, but my doctor had told me 16 to 20 eggs is what he was hoping for in this retrieval. And I think had that happened, I would have just kind of shelved those eggs and carried on with the relationship. But what ended up happening was I only got 7 eggs. And my doctor just didn't do a great job of informing me about what that meant or what my options were or considering doing a second round or anything like that. And I just freaked out. I mean, to me, that meant I've waited too long. I'm going to struggle to get pregnant. I've got fertility issues. And here I've got this lovely man that I've been dating for like 2 or 3 months. It was way too early. But the best explanation I have is the relationship just imploded because of my own fertility concern. And this guy is so lovely. I mean, we're still very good friends and he was very supportive through everything, but I just needed to move forward. I knew motherhood was not something that I was willing to not experience. And I really wanted a biological connection to my child and to experience pregnancy. And I just couldn't wait to see if the relationship, I wanted to be able to wait and see if the relationship turned out, but I just emotionally couldn't handle it.
So that's a really good point. Because one of my questions as you're talking is, obviously you were very solid in wanting children and wanting your own children, which that's your decision. There's nothing wrong with that. So at one point, were you so fearful that that was not an option? You were willing to take this path, like this non-traditional path, and basically fuck all societal expectations? Because again, you're in Texas. This is very traditional. Like, there must have been opinions around you.
I had never, ever considered doing it on my own. Like, I think maybe right before I met this last guy that I dated, I think I maybe had kind of experimented with saying like, I guess I could just get a sperm donor. But I couldn't even say it without it was the most ridiculous, saddest, worst case scenario thing that I could imagine. I just was certain that's not going to happen to me.
From my own, I have a very traditional life. So I feel like that's an existential question. Yes. Am I going to do this? Because certainly it's an option now, right? Much more of an option when I got married, 20 years ago. But you're still coming up against all of these societal expectations and sort of the quote unquote failure as a woman who's really just checked all the boxes except this one, which is depending on who you're talking to or listening to is the only reason we're on fucking earth.
Right. Right.
Obviously I do not believe that, but it is we are here to procreate. It's how the world works, right? We have to have women in order to procreate. So, and apparently we don't need men. All right. I mean, we do.
Amazing things we can buy on the internet.
Yeah. So I just, I'm fascinated by that part of it because there is so much mental work that must have had to go into that, right? Like when you're alone at night, like, can I do this? Do you remember when there was a shift from this is a joke? Like, well, I guess I could just buy some sperm to actually, I think I'm going to buy some sperm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a part of me that always knew I definitely could handle the logistics of solo motherhood and actually thought, like, I think I had always kind of worried about how I would co-parent because I'm a pretty opinionated person. I like to be in control, never been great at a group project, like just really like to do it my way. So, finding a partner, I mean, this is just to be completely blunt about it. It's like this guy is either going to have to really meet my high standards or just kind of allow me to like step aside and let me do it my way. But most men, I just was like, this is going to be rough. Like co-parenting is going to be rough because I'm an educator. I've got like early childhood development background. I know a lot of things about kids. And I just thought, who is this guy that is going to like be a value add to this situation? And not that I don't think dad is super important. I have a very close relationship with my own dad, but I was honestly concerned about partnering in this particular project. I wanted a life partner. I wanted someone to go out to dinner with. I like, the physical intimacy. I love being in love, like all of that. But the parenting piece, it was not hard to let go of imagining doing that particular thing because I think immediately I was like, oh, this is going to be so much easier in a lot of ways. I think financially, I had some major hurdles to get over. A lot of it mindset, but some of it like actual numbers. Like I just needed to figure out how to make more money.
And what were you doing at the time?
I've been an educator my whole life, and I was a teacher for a long time and a special education teacher, a dyslexia teacher. And then at this point I had moved into administration. So I had a bit of a boost, but I was still a public educator, making not very much. So part of my story is that I did start this side hustle, which has now grown into the business that I run now. But at first it was just like, oh, I could do this thing that I really enjoy that feels purposeful and make a little bit of extra money. And all of it was going towards my fertility treatment. So we can that's skipping a little bit ahead, but come back to that in a little bit. But essentially, I think I knew I could parent alone. I wasn't sure if I could afford to parent alone. And I was just in deep shame about what I thought people would think, what I thought it meant about me, how I had like failed to do this fundamental thing of partnering. So I definitely remember, and I actually wrote this in a journal that like I would be ready to do it today if no one would find out about it. Like I just didn't want anybody
I'm gonna cry.
I know.
I'm glad you put it out there to the universe, right? Because there is something to be said about like, if I can just get this out, like if I can get it out into the world and voice it, then you can sort of pick it apart and be like, no, actually, that's not logical. That's that's a deep-seated belief, limiting belief.
Well, and there's two different versions of this story. And I just really wanted to be able to control the narrative. Because on one hand, it's like, wow, that's fucking wild. Like, that's so empowering that you feel like confident enough to take this step and that like you're willing to go against societal norms. And that's what I think when I see other women doing it. But then there's the story of like, oh, what's wrong with her? And it took really getting in touch with the thing that I thought that I was most worried that people would think about me. Because at first I would say, oh, I'm just worried that people will think like I can't get a man. But that wasn't it because I had always been in relationships, long relationships, pretty healthy relationships with good guys. I just had never found that one right person that I could see spending, the rest of my life with. And so when I realized the real issue was that I worried people would think she can't keep a man. Like she can bring him in, but like, what is it about her that is just so unlovable that they all leave? Even though a lot of times I was the one doing the breaking up and it was the optics. Like I just couldn't handle that people were going to have their own version of my story. And I think if I had like been able to broadcast, hey, this is what's happening here. I'm actually making this choice from an empowered place, but I didn't get to do that. I had to just do it and let people think what they were going to think. And I think that was probably the hardest shift for me. I also didn't know anyone else who had done it. People who were in my age bracket and who I respected and wanted to kind of be like. I did know a couple older women who actually in the 90s had become solo moms, both of them through adoption. One is someone that I'm related to. don't have a very close relationship with her and would not want to emulate that situation. And then another was a woman that I nannied for when I was in high school and college. And she was a solo mom and she was an attorney and had adopted both of her kids. But she worked, I felt like in a lot of ways, like, why did she even have kids? Because I'm over here all the time raising them because she's working so hard to be able to afford them and this whole lavish lifestyle. Like it just didn't feel great. And so, so I don't know. I didn't have any models.
Yeah, I think that there's so many things that we do in life. And I'm sober. I've been sober for 3 years and I felt very much the same. Like, what is this going to say about me? Then also I wanted to control the narrative. And so I did, right? Like I became very vocal about it and very vulnerable and very but then I got to control the story. And if you heard it, great. If you didn't, I didn't care.
Yeah.
But at least I could stand in it and be confident that here's the reasoning. Here it is on a plate. You do with it what you choose, but I'm not going to have this mental chatter anymore of what do you think? And I think once I opened the door for that, it allowed me to open the door for other things that I've done that are unconventional that I'm like, it's like the gateway drug.
Yeah.
To allowing you to do a whole bunch of things like this, right? Like then you go out and I did the same thing, right? Like I started a business around it. I started a podcast around it. I did a lot of things with a partner and I pursued that for a while because it was like my obstacle, my way. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you did that too.
Yeah. And I also had the input from a coach that this one line was worth every single penny that I paid her for all the hours of work we did together. I was in a deep spiral of, well, they're going to think this and they're going to say that. And what if they think this and da-da-da. And she just paused and she said, do you think you could let them be wrong about you? Oh, yeah, I actually could. And when I realized that the exact people I was worried about judging me, I could rattle off easy a list of judgments I had about those same exact people and the way they were living their life. I was like, oh, of course they're going to judge me. I'm judging them. We all judge each other. It's totally fine. Like the people that I really care about who are close enough to me to get the real story, those are the people I care about.
I always equate it to choose the people that you want to sit at the table with you.
Yes.
And we have a running list. I have a running list. Everybody's got a running list of these people that for whatever reason in your life, they're the person that every time you post something, every time you write something, every time you do something, they're the ones in your head judging you. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a list of them. Maybe there's one person, whatever. Very likely they're not thinking about you at all.
Right.
But there is that but I wouldn't invite that person to sit at my table.
Right.
I don't want to have dinner with them. I don't want to spend my time with them. So I'm letting them take up so much energy. And again, when you start doing this stuff, when you start pushing back a little bit and getting into the, let them be wrong about you. I mean, I know there's this major push right now. Mel Robbins has her book, Let Them. Just let them do what they're going to do. That has nothing to do with you. But this particular situation, your particular situation is so fundamentally against, we're getting better, right? We're definitely getting better about it, but it's still very non-traditional, very what does it say about me as a actual human being, which is such a judgment.
But I don't know. I know the listeners can't see this, but behind me, I have, I don't know how many holiday cards. Every single one of them is from a single mother by choice. And my
my God. Well, we're definitely going to show that. Can you show it again?
Yeah. My network is getting close to 1,000 women who have done this or are doing this or on the path.
I mean, you have created the community that you were looking for.
Yes.
You can't get much more. The obstacle is the way, right? You cannot get much more than that. Hey there, listeners. It's Katie. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Female Founders Collective. I started this collective because I know firsthand how challenging it can be to build a business from the ground up. As female founders, we're balancing so much, our dreams, our families, our sanity, and it can feel pretty lonely out there. That's why the collective is all about real connection and support. We're a community of women who are sharing what works, what doesn't, and having each other's backs. So if you're looking for a network that truly gets it, come join us at the Female Founders Collective. We meet virtually every single Wednesday at noon Central Standard Time. It's always free. It will never be a charge. This is something that I am really passionate about. Come and join us. You can register by going to katierip.com. So tell me about like the actual process. So here you are, you've now made the decision, you've talked to the doctors, you've got 7. What does that scientifically look like?
So I had the eggs frozen. The relationship kind of imploded. We were still kind of trying to figure out, like, basically we broke up and then we just continued like doing all the same things, but not calling ourselves a couple because the draw was still there. It was just like, he could see that I had to do something about this and it just didn't make sense for us to do anything together. But we were kind of in conversation about like, could he potentially be a donor? And we would kind of like cart before the horse and have legal things in place but like maybe just start co-parenting and then eventually see if a relationship ended up working. So all that was going on. So it was very much emotionally out of sorts, which is when I started working with a coach because I had done therapy and I was like, I just feel like therapists are like holding space, but not figuring out how to help me figure this out. So I decided to try coaching and I was familiar. I was listening to podcasts and reading books and stuff, but it was my first time to actually work with a coach one-on-one. And things get hazy like several years ago, but this was 2019. I started trying to conceive in 2019 and so there are kind of 2 different ways fertility treatment wise that you can try to get pregnant. One is called IUI. It's intrauterine insemination. It's essentially like a medically supervised turkey baster situation. They just put the sperm in there at the right time of the month and, see what happens.
Love it. Great.
So that obviously is like the least invasive, most like closest to what would be happening in a couple situation. So it made sense to start there since I didn't have, even though my egg count was potentially lower than average, there was no other reason to suspect. I'm still ovulating every month and you only need 1 egg. It has nothing to do with like how many you've got left in the vault. So that was the recommended way to start. So I chose a donor and every month I would do the IUI at the appropriate time. I was monitoring my ovulation and all of that.
Oh, like at home?
No, I would go into the clinic. So I was monitoring my ovulation at home. There are little like sticks that you can pee on, kind of like pregnancy tests. But then I would go in at the appropriate time and it was a medically supervised thing. They're also doing like blood work and things to monitor the hormones, but it's pretty minimally invasive and it has about a 20% success rate. So it's very low, but it does work. And they usually recommend that you try, if you don't have any other like known fertility issues, that you try like 3 or 4 rounds, because if it does work, it's way less expensive than going through IVF.
Yeah. So that was my next question. Like financially, is this is a cheaper option to start?
It is. And especially if you have a donor who is donating to you, like if you've got like a friend or, a lot of times like lesbian couples will have someone in their life who's being their donor. If that piece is that you're not paying for that piece, then it is pretty affordable. It's probably around like $200 to $500. At least it was at the time. I think prices have gone up, but a vial of sperm is about $1,000. Now it's not, but at the time it was around $1,000. So it wasn't inexpensive. I mean, I was probably spending $1,200 to $1,500 a month playing this slot machine of, and in my mind, I was like, well, that's what daycare is going to cost. So we'll see how this feels.
Right. Like, let's see how it goes. Then I can just know that I can afford daycare after it works. Right. I mean, that's a logical way to look at it. I love it.
Yeah. So, I did get pregnant in the 4th IUI. However, the pregnancy did not last. It was a very early miscarriage and I never really experienced you're pregnant. Like it was gone before it really started. And it was kind of a helpful experience because I was not excited when I found out that IUI worked. I was pretty devastated. Like I was very confused and like, what have I done? And maybe I jumped the gun. I was still spending a lot of time with this guy and I was feeling like maybe if I just waited like another month or 2 and just had a lot of like emotional angst about it. And I'm very thankful for that experience. I'm thankful that the pregnancy was not viable, that it was a very early loss, because I think it really helped me to clarify that I had more work to do before I was going to be.
Yeah. Do they prepare you for loss?
No, I had a terrible doctor at the time. He wasn't prepared for anything. He was awful. Yeah.
I'm just, cause it's pretty common. I don't know, to be honest, but like I've heard that it can be common that in that kind of situation, loss is more common than it is with the natural birth.
I don't think it's more highly correlated. I mean, I think the fact that I got pregnant is thanks to the like carefully timed like making sure the sperm was in the right place at the right time. Like I might have had a hard time getting pregnant with a partner at the time unless we were like really like calculating. I think the early loss has to do with my age and being, I believe I was 38 at the time. Being 38, you know, some of your eggs are still genetically healthy and others have chromosomal abnormalities just because that's what happens as we age. Yeah. And so my guess is that egg that ovulated that month was just not a chromosomally healthy egg. And so
well, and also when you're in fertility like that, when you're in like an active fertility like that, it's more sort of public that it didn't work versus somebody that's doing it traditionally at home might not share that. Like you don't know that they're trying. You don't know that they're like, this is a sort of a public thing. You can hide it, I suppose, but it's probably just more, it doesn't, not necessarily that it happens more. It's just that we hear about it more, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, I took some time, and I will say if had that pregnancy worked out, my due date would have been March of 2020. Give you time to think about what was going on in the world.
If you already had a little angst about it, it might have been a different story.
Yes. And I think too, you know, being unpartnered in March of 2020, weird things were going on with, I mean, obviously women kept having babies, but in terms of who could be at the hospital with you and who could be in the room, the fact that I didn't have a partner, like I don't know would have been allowed at that time. And then like I wouldn't have been able to have support. I wouldn't have been able to have friends and family come over because I wasn't even seeing my parents at that time in March of 2020 because of we were all like really distanced. So thank goodness that did not work out. And what happened instead was I took a little bit of time. I did do 2 more IUIs after that loss. It took my body a while to kind of come back to having a regular cycle and all of that. But several months after that loss, that was in the summer of 2019. And I did do a couple more IUIs that didn't work. But the thing that I did that was most helpful during that time was I started working with a coach, and I started my podcast in March of 2020. And at the time, I didn't know anybody who was going through what I was going through. I didn't know any other solo moms, but I had learned how to podcast course and a mic, and I was planning to start a podcast about dyslexia, which was my professional field.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I, you know, all of a sudden we're in lockdown. We're home. I've got all this time on my hands. I'm working from home. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to start that podcast. And I just didn't start it. And I finally realized, oh, it's because I don't want to. Like whatever that urge was to do that, like that ship has sailed. But now I have this equipment, and this is the thing that I'm going through. And it's the thing that I'm thinking the most about. And I'm not finding a whole lot of like content out there about it. There were no podcasts that I could find about it. So I decided to start a podcast. I decided to do, I can't remember if it was, I think it was 10 episodes that I said, like, I'll do this many. Mm-hmm. I know I will suck for the first 10 for sure. And so if I quit before I get to 10, it will be because it's hard and I'm bad at it. Yeah. But if I do 10 and then I don't want to continue, then that's where I'll stop. And I don't know how many episodes I have now, but I've been doing it since 2020. So a lot.
Is it weekly?
No, it's every other week. And then I take breaks. I do it kind of in a season, and then I'll kind of.
Sure. Yeah.
Started the podcast, and I started reaching out to other women who I was finding in Facebook groups and on Instagram and different places who were solo moms or who were considering it or pursuing that path. And it's pretty common for women to start kind of a private Instagram account to document their journey, and, you know, they don't use their real name, or they, you know, it's kind of an anonymous thing.
It's very similar to sobriety, right? Like my Instagram handle when I first got sober was from vino to vinyasa, and I was faceless. Nobody knew it, right? Like it was, again, it's sort of the gateway drug to like vulnerability. Yeah. And there's a ton of community out on Instagram. There is really a ton of it.
Yeah. And so that was how I was finding women to be on my podcast. And it was just interesting because I had all of these judgments about myself. So at this point, I was in between. I had stopped trying IUIs. Oh, I did another egg retrieval. And so I had the 7 eggs, and then I did another retrieval. I got 7 that time as well. This was all in December of 2019. And so I had 14 eggs total. When they thawed the first 7, 2 of them did not survive the thaw. So that gave me 12 eggs total, and I fertilized those eggs. Statistically, we were hoping for maybe 1 embryo out of that, but really the statistics would say I would get like 0.5 of an embryo out of 12 eggs. So that was not looking good. It was looking like I most likely was going to have to do multiple rounds of IVF to get embryos that were viable. However, in those 12 eggs, I ended up with 5 viable embryos.
Mm.
And so what I mean by viable embryos is that they develop to the 5-day mark, which is where most reproductive endocrinologists want them to be at the time that you freeze them. So they keep them developing in the lab until they hit day 5. Then they're able to biopsy them and test the genetics. So we already know these embryos don't have Down syndrome. They don't have trisomy 18. They don't have like any of these things that
Really?
we also know the sex of the embryo because that's part of the DNA that they can test. So I got this news back that I had 5 chromosomally normal embryos. 2 were male and 3 were female. And they were frozen. And at that point, I was 39, maybe 38. I think I was 38, about to turn 39. And those embryos, there's no rush.
They just stop growing?
So they freeze them. Yeah, they freeze them and they stop growing. And so...
And then they thaw them and they continue to grow?
So around day 5, 6, 7-ish is when they need to be back in a uterus because they need to attach to the uterine lining.
Yeah.
They can stop the growth anywhere from like day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they can freeze it anytime in there, and then they can put it back into a uterus, and that's where it will either implant or not implant.
Nobody can see my face right now, but I'm very, very interested in this.
Please, for your listeners, I'm not a doctor, so
No, right. Yeah. Disclaimer, we're not doctors, and I don't even know what I'm talking about. However, it is fascinating.
It is fascinating. And so these genetically healthy embryos have roughly a 65% chance of a live birth per embryo.
Oh, that seems like a really high number.
Much higher. Yeah, much higher than the slot machine of playing the IUI game, right?
Yeah.
And so with 5 embryos, it was mathematically certain that one of those was going to lead to a healthy birth, right? Probably more than one, but I felt like I had enough to do the thing that I didn't think was ever going to be a possibility for me, which was take a fucking break. I got to stop trying to get pregnant because remember, none of this time did I want to be pregnant as a solo mom. I just didn't want to miss the boat. I just didn't want to lose the opportunity. So I felt like it was very much like scarcity. I should just force myself to be happy with what's available to me. It did not feel like a choice. And it's funny because in the intro, you mentioned several times, the word choice and single mother by choice. I hated that label. And it is what people call us, single mothers by choice. SMBCs is the acronym that you find online if you wanted to hashtag, look for it. But I could not say single mother by choice because it did not feel like a choice. I wanted to single mother by necessity or force, cruelty of the universe or whatever. But not by choice. It was not a choice that I would have made had I had any other choices, which, was a very unempowered place to be coming from. It felt very true at the time. Now I look back, I'm of course I had choices. Lower the bar far enough. I could have married a slew of men that I dated at some point. I just didn't want to,
It wasn't the choice that you wanted.
Right.
But it was a choice, right? It is one of the multiple choices we get.
Yes. And one of the things I do with my coaching clients now is walk them through and work with them as they kind of face the grief around what wasn't on the menu. And I like that way of framing it because it's you can walk into a restaurant and it does not matter how much you wanted the chicken parmesan. If they're out of it and if it's just, it's not, they don't have it.
Yeah.
And you can be really sad but are you going to be hungry or are you going to pick something else? There are other delicious things on the menu. And that's what this felt like to me was I had to get to a point where I just was really honest with, I'm not choosing between doing this on my own or doing this with a partner. Doing it with a partner is not on the menu because I'm pushing up against 40. I know my fertility is not stellar. And I would be choosing between doing this on my own this way right now or getting back on the dating apps and swiping. That was the choice. Hedging my bets and risking missing the boat was the choice I had on the other side, not doing it with a partner.
Right. It's not that you couldn't do it at all.
Right.
That wasn't the choice. It was whether you do it alone or you do it with a partner that you didn't necessarily get to choose either, right? You could have chosen a different partner that would have been not the person that would have been a good match, right? It could have been a really horrible choice. We just don't know, except there's something you said in there about grieving this stuff.
Yeah.
And very likely you coach on that, right? Like getting through the grief of this was never really an option for you, whether that's God or the universe or however you live your life and choose to move through grief. When you don't get something you want, there is a grieving process that if you don't give your time to feel it, you'll never get to the other side of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there was a breakthrough? There was some sort of like, I grieved this part of it. And then like to me, I hear that you had 5 viable embryos. I'm like, well, something had to have shifted.
Yeah.
Like the podcast was there. Something in the universe shifted to manifest 5 embryos. That's not a normal response to that. So like something had to have energetically shifted.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there was something that you could pinpoint?
It was all kind of happening at the same time. I did get the news back about the embryos at the same time as some relationships were really shifting, like friendships, girlfriends.
Yep.
And I'm not sober. I don't claim that. I drink wine, once in a blue moon. But I really, really redefined my relationship with alcohol, which meant redefining my relationships, a lot of them. And so I went through, honestly, it was as hard of a breakup as I've ever had with a romantic partner, with an entire friend group who I just felt like I just can't be the person that I want to be in this context. And the draw is too strong to go like sit and drink and like gossip. And like the vibe was I just was kind of outgrowing the situation. And so I think that was a huge transition. And it was partly my decision, and it was partly thrust upon me by just some like ugly things that these women, and I'm sure you've dealt with this as well, where it's like, if you don't want to face your own stuff, you can't be in the room with someone who's willing and ready to face theirs. And it was a big threat to be redefining. But I realized these girlfriends had been my friends for a decade. And other than being at work, I'd met some of them at work. And other than being at work, I could not remember a time when we'd been together and not drinking. And I would think about like, oh, we did that fun run that started at 8 a.m. And I'd be like, oh no, but then we had mimosas at brunch after. Like I really could not find a time in a decade that we had spent time together and not drank. And so knowing that that was something that I really wanted to change, like it was a huge loss, but it also was a real breakthrough. And at the same time, I was starting to really dig into personal development and reading a bunch of books and listening to podcasts. And I started working with a coach. So I think the 2 things that really shifted energetically for me was like understanding that my thoughts were creating my life, not my circumstances. Like that shift of understanding that like I am the author of all of this. And the way that I frame it, whether this is empowering or defeating, completely depends on how I'm thinking about it. And I can feel that shift. And even just like my desire to drink, it could be really sad that I was giving up this thing that I had enjoyed for so many years. But like that wasn't a helpful way to think about it. Like a helpful way to think about it was like, I'm outgrowing this thing and I can't wait to see who I am when I don't have, because I was never all of the things that I wanted to do, I wasn't going to do after a glass of wine, right? Like I wasn't going to go to the gym. I wasn't going to write in my journal.
Same girl, same.
Yeah. So that was a really helpful shift. And that didn't happen all at once. It was a very gradual thing, but it's just, I prayed, and I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person. And I do prayer and journaling are kind of the same to me. I may just be talking to myself, but maybe that's enough. Like my height.
I think it's something, like some kind of faith in something.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is, really. I think just having some sort of faith.
Yeah. But for the longest time, I think my desire was just to not desire alcohol. And it was so fun to get to a point where like I'm in Trader Joe's and I'm not even considering putting a bottle of wine in my cart. Not because I can't have it, but because I genuinely don't want it.
Yeah. For me, that was the shift too. And I am blessed with when I am done with something, I am done. Mm-hmm. I just like whatever bone or muscle that is, I just was born with it. Like it's good and bad, by the way, right? Like there's not necessarily things that are good about this, but when I am done with something, I'm done. So when I made that decision, it was just over for me. Like this doesn't serve me anymore. I don't care what people think about it. It's changed my life fundamentally for the better. And that's it, right? Like I just decided. And Now, just like you, like that came with some hard choices and hard goodbyes and hard things, but these are the hard things we can do.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. It's the decision to make it rather than like the forced decision on you. And I didn't want to get to that place. I wanted the narrative around that. I wanted to be the one. And I could see that eventually I was not going to be the one to make that decision. So, and so that part of it, it is a culmination of a whole bunch of things, right? Like when I got to that space and then the space beyond I'm at now, it wasn't like one day I just flipped a switch. Yes, one day I was drinking and one day I wasn't, but it was 25 years of personal development, books, podcasts, like trying to fix myself, like really digging into what's wrong here. Like, why don't I feel aligned? Why don't I feel good? And then like it all came together and it just happened to be in the span of 3 years, which is really just a blink of an eye now. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that the kind of personal development journey that I was on outside of all of the fertility stuff was huge. And then the other piece was starting the podcast. I was just meeting so many women who were so remarkable and so just people that I would love to be friends with in any other context, that I was impressed by, you know, their careers and they were funny and they were beautiful and they were like, just had all of these things going for them. And it just became kind of ridiculous to have this thought. Like I finally realized I can't be the one outlier who's like a huge loser who wound up in this place. If all of these women are so remarkable, like maybe I am too. Like maybe I was wrong about what this meant about me, because I can see it in the other women. I can see how incredibly brave it is to not settle and how hard it is because many of these women walked away from marriages, walked away from good enough relationships, like, decided not to settle. And I realized there's a whole other kind of subset of this demographic of women who are pushing up against the end of their fertility years, who are single, who are victims of their circumstance, and they don't do anything about it. They either do settle for the guy that they're going to divorce a few years later and they're miserable and they have to deal with custody stuff for the rest of their life, or they miss out. And I just realized we are the women who neither of those were acceptable. I'm not going to miss out and I'm not going to settle. And so this is what is available to me as the third door. And I cannot overemphasize how incredible these women are that I've met. Like hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them, that are the best friends I've ever had in my life. The people that most inspire me. They're those people, they say like you're an average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I like dozens of women that I'm like, I'm only better because I just know you exist. Like, even if we don't interact that much, like just knowing you're out there doing your thing, like they're writers, they're doctors, just doing incredible things. I've read novels by my clients. I know who I would call if I needed an attorney. I know, like, just
like all the resources you get out of this too, right?
Right. So I'm holding career. It's just about like the caliber of the women that I've met. And so I had to shift my thinking because it didn't make sense that I was the one loser in this bunch of remarkable women, right?
Yeah. So I'm sitting here holding my breath like, I don't want to interrupt, but I just like, you must see yourself in that. Now, like you must see yourself in that, because when I look at you, that's what I see is like a remarkable person that went out and did something so far beyond tradition, right? Like it isn't so far beyond tradition anymore. And I hope you're not like taking offense to that part of it. It's just, we just don't get to see this. And then the shame around it keeps it like secret. And so you don't know that women are struggling with it. Mm-hmm. You don't know that there's somebody out there until you find a tribe, until you find a community of people. And you're like, oh my God, you're just like me. Exactly. Oh my God, you have the same feelings I do. And this makes me belong, because otherwise you don't belong. And that is a fundamental need of us. And especially as we get into our 40s and 50s, like we need to belong somewhere. And so many of us feel like we don't belong because we fucking checked all the boxes and we still don't feel like we belong.
I know for certain that personally, and for the several hundred women who are part of the network that I'm creating, I know that we are more supported and less lonely than we would be in partnership. I know it. I know that our networks are stronger. I know that the communication that we have on a daily basis and the number of people who would absolutely be there for me at the drop of a hat, it's different than it would. I've been coupled. I know what that's like. And I think about just little things like here in Austin, we don't get a whole lot of snow, but when we do, the whole city just shuts down. Like the world does not know how to handle snow here. So, we don't have water. We don't have power. Like it's just, you go to like third world conditions. Yeah. It's really bad. And so when I was pregnant and we had a storm that like shut down everything, the number of people who offered to bring me water, checked in on me, were like just there for me. I know if I had some dude in my house, he would not be getting water, but he also like, no one would be checking on me either. You know, it's just like the being solo, I think reminds people, not in a, oh, I feel so sorry for you, or, oh, you can't do it yourself. But I think there's just like a different sense of community because it never all comes from that one partner. Nobody's partner is meeting all of their needs. No. But we assume that they are. And we don't check in on people. We don't want to impose on their family time, or we don't, we just assume that people kind of have what they need, which is usually not the case.
I mean, like, I want to be part of your tribe.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I want to be there. And I have a different collective of women that are all female entrepreneurs. And that is a very isolating place. Mm-hmm. It's when you want to do it differently, like you're doing it, right? Like we are all very heart-led business owners. We want to be, and we are in a patriarchal business society. So when you try to do things differently, which is a little bit less, I don't know, dramatic, but like it is something like, hey, I'm having this issue.
Yeah.
I can't go to my entrepreneur husband because he doesn't fucking get it. Right. Who gets it out here?
Yeah, no, and what you're doing is amazing.
It's just really finding people who get it. Yes. I don't need you to fix me. I just need you to get it.
Yeah. Yes. And it's been on I have your recurring meeting on my calendar and I haven't been able to make it yet, but
please
but I would love to get involved because I had that realization recently that I want the type of community that I'm creating for women on this path, but in entrepreneurship, because I don't have those business connections. So definitely love what you're doing. And it is very much the same, I think.
And there's lots of community, like it could be in a totally different way, right? Like there's a health community, a walking community, like whatever that is, whatever struggle you have, finding a community that gets it is, so important. I have met the most amazing people either in that community or via my podcast, because I get to meet people who actually did something. And that's all I really like. Yeah. That's who I am. Yeah. So I feel like when you have a connection like that, there is just like, I have met my own business coach, my own virtual assistant, like through my own podcast. And I'm sure, like you said, you have an attorney at your beck and call because you were connected through this one thing that you have in common that in one way or another was cloaked in shame and or secrecy at some point. Mm-hmm. And when you got it out, like this is the way, this is what you get out of it. Like this is the reward, which nobody can tell you.
Yes.
I'm sure when you started your business, nobody was going to be able to tell you that you have an entire wall of Christmas cards with kids and moms all over them, right? Like I just keep looking behind you and I'm like, wow, what a testament. So we didn't really get into like, oh my God, you had a baby.
Yeah, I did have a baby. So I got the news about my embryos. I decided I was going to take a break because I really wasn't sure that solo motherhood, I think I was pursuing it from a place of just desperation and scarcity through the IUI route. But now knowing that I had these embryos and it really didn't matter if I was 40 or 43 or, however old, the success rate was going to be the same. It gave me time, and it gave me time to really find some closure in that relationship that had been kind of like dragging along the whole time. Cause now I could have explored that. Like we could have had time if we wanted or needed that.
Can I ask you just one question, Katie? Cause you just said something like, now I could take a break, because I guess I've never really connected that it's the egg that's old, not the person.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So it's not like you can't carry it because you're older. It's because the eggs are older. Is that right? So like you basically froze.
Yes. And that's how we hear of celebrities having babies at 50 or 48 or whatever. And it's because either they're using eggs that they froze at a younger age, or donor eggs. Like no one's getting pregnant at 50. It's not happening. That's not a thing.
So interesting. I have never really made that connection, to be honest with you. Like I guess I just thought like, oh God, these people are lucky that they're, like 55 and they can still get pregnant. But like you basically so your eggs were only 38 years old.
Yeah.
But your body was in its 40s.
Yes.
And that's fine, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how we do it. Okay. I feel like I learned something really new today.
Yeah. So during that time, I started my podcast. We did have the COVID lockdowns. All of that was happening in the spring of 2020. And I was just doing a lot of like deep work. I was home. I didn't have anything else going on. It was just kind of like forced reflection. And I really got to a place where I genuinely felt ready. I had really worked through a lot of the shame that I felt and the disappointment around, this is what my life is going to look like. I was also making a ton of online connections because everybody kind of went online because we were all stuck at home. And so just that culmination of the coaching and the personal development, starting the podcast, starting to build a little bit of a community online, I decided that I was ready to do an embryo transfer in July of 2020. So just a little bit, we were still in lockdown, but fertility clinics had reopened and I was ready. And so I got to that time go in. It was my first embryo transfer and it was a very different experience than the slot machine of the IUI, because with the IUI, it's like I couldn't stop myself from doing it because I was so panicked about my fertility, but I also every time was so relieved when it didn't work. And like, it was just like, I can't not do anything, but I don't want to be doing this was kind of how it felt. And so this was very different because I was ready and I got super dressed up that day. I had on my bright red lipstick. I was like, I'm going to get my baby, and I just knew it was going to work the first time. And my doctor, I remember she was like, okay, at this point, you're going to go home and, obviously don't get in a hot tub. Like, here are the guidelines, but like, there's nothing you're going to do that's going to mess this up if it's going to work. And there's nothing you can do to make it work. Like at this point, we're just sitting statistically at that 65% chance. So it's got a better chance of working than not working. And she's just blah, 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 all of the stuff. And I'm like, it worked. It's working. I know. I just didn't need to, I wasn't worried. I just knew, I already knew it was a boy. I had a name for my son. Like I knew it was going to happen. And it did. It worked. And I got to be pregnant while we were still at home in sweatpants, which was lovely. I did a lot of
amazing. Yeah. Both my kids were born in May. So I had September through May, which was like big sweaters and leggings the entire time.
Perfect. Yeah. So it was lovely. I loved being pregnant. I had a really easy, smooth, healthy pregnancy. Never had like a minute of worry through my whole pregnancy. I had a beautiful birth. It's funny. I tell my birth story on my own podcast, but I didn't know I was in labor. I was past my due date and had eaten some Mexican food and then started like violently throwing up and thought I had food poisoning. And I was like, this is the most inconvenient time for me
to be hurling over a toilet, right?
Like there's something wrong with your chicken. No, that was labor. So I didn't know I was in labor for about half the time that I was in labor because I thought it was gastrointestinal. Like I wasn't experiencing like waves. I was just like massive cramping and throwing up. And no one told me that throwing up could be part of it. So by the time I got to the hospital, it was like, if you can wait to push till the doctor gets here, that'd be great. But if not, I was like, I don't think it's great. So I had a super fast, unmedicated, like beautiful, easy delivery. Loved it. Would absolutely like 10 out of 10 do it again. And so that was it. Like it was great. It was easy. I was immediately in love with my son. It was exactly the way that it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Just loved it.
Divine timing.
Yes. Yeah.
So like now we're 4 or 5 years into parenthood, right?
It was 3.5. So
3.5. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had gone through a coach training. So I started my podcast and also did a coach training while we were in lockdown and like during kind of before pregnancy and during pregnancy. And so as part of my coach training, I needed to do some practice hours. And so of course it could be anyone on any topic, but I decided to those same women that I was scouting for the podcast, like those were the women I was going to offer this like free coaching to. And I really, really liked it. And I was doing it all for free. And I think I worked with maybe like 7 or 8 women. And then I was like, I could maybe like, I feel okay about charging because I think like I'm actually helping people. I was going through the training just for my own knowledge. Like I never intended to be a coach. Like I just wanted the insider information and it was COVID. I had nothing to do. And it was kind of like my last chance to do this like deep dive in personal development because I was about to become a solo mom and who knew what that was going to look like. So I did this coaching and I had a handful of clients and I ramped it up a little bit towards the end of my pregnancy because I realized like I'm making some extra money and it's really helping with all of these medical costs that I'm having. And so that was great. And I thought, well, we'll see after I have the baby, maybe in like 3 or 4 months, maybe I'll just like one night a week get a babysitter. And well, that was cute of me to think that I'd be ready 3 or 4 months after I had the baby.
Yeah. Cute. Cute.
Yeah. So 15 months later, I decided to come back to it. Meanwhile, I had been doing the podcast throughout that time, taking breaks, but like I had been putting out some episodes of the podcast. And because there really was nothing out there on this topic, people were finding my podcast and it was getting traction, even though, you know, I wasn't super consistent with it. It still was one of the only resources out there. So I was kind of gathering this critical mass of people. So when I put back out there that I was interested in, I mean, I really thought I'd take like 1 or 2 one-on-one clients one night a week. And the response was just insane. There was no way. I mean, I'd have like a 2-year waiting list. So I couldn't do one-on-one, which was terrifying because I'd never considered doing groups. Remember, I didn't want to be a coach. Like that was not.
Yeah, right.
But I had to figure out how to do groups because it was the only way. And so I started doing group coaching just to meet the demand. And I think I was charging like $20 a person. And, you know, it was just kind of like this little extra side hustle. It paid for the babysitter that I needed the night that I did it. And then like a little bit of extra, but there kept being like more and more people interested in it. And I was getting better and better at it. And I was feeling more and more confident that what I was offering was of value. And I had this realization that, well, these women were coming for the coaching. And for some of them, they weren't into personal development. They didn't know anything about coaching. They just were interested in the solo mom topic. So it was like kind of opening up this whole entire world to these women. And I thought, you know, the coaching is really, of course, useful. And I'm trying to provide value. And I think that's happening. And I could probably log off and go do laundry for an hour and come back in an hour and all these women would still be on this call because what they really want is the connection with one another.
Yeah.
And it's like the coaching was like taking up the airspace and they just wanted me to stop so that they could like chat. So I realized that was like a separate offer, that community groups is what I called it, but that we needed to have just the container for bringing together. I do 10 women at a time, like coming together who are all at a similar stage and just talking about the medical stuff, the how are you telling your conservative grandparents part, the what does leave look like at your work and how do I advocate for myself and how do I tell my boss and, you know, all of those types of things. What do you tell your child about being donor conceived and how do you choose a donor and all of those topics? They didn't have anybody that they could talk to about that. And it wasn't necessarily like coaching that they needed. They wanted like crowdsourcing. They wanted discussion and support.
Yeah.
And so I started doing these community groups in 2022. And that's where I was like, this is a business. Like I have to keep doing this because I am so happy. Like I get emotional just thinking about it. Like I'm so happy for these women that they have this. Like if I don't offer it, who will? Like I have to keep doing this, whether it's inconvenient, whether I want to or not. Like this has to be made available because of the value of connection at this like excruciating time. I was literally watching women make that same transition that took me years of like slogging it through in a 90-minute call. Like they would come to a 90-minute call and leave feeling excited instead of defeated. And coaching was part of it, but these groups didn't have any coaching. Like I was still doing group coaching on a particular topic, like choosing a donor and come if you want to talk about that. And it was one-off and you may or may not see the other women on the call again. You could exchange info if you wanted to. But these community groups were really where women were experiencing this shift. And I still do 6-week groups where we come together for 6 weeks in a row for 90 minutes. But then there's also a WhatsApp group associated with the community. Yeah. And that continues on after the 6 weeks. And so those groups continue. I'm still in them, but I'm not super active because I have like 30 now, I think. But even the groups from 2022 are still, they'll have like a monthly reunion call. They're still chatting pretty, weekly or so. And these groups have continued to support one another for years I have one group where they're all considering a second child at this point.
Yeah. Well, first of all, like my mentor hat on is it's okay to make money at this, right?
Yeah,
like
totally. Yeah.
This is heart-led coaching at its finest.
Yeah. Every single thing I put out, I'm so excited for the person that's buying it. Like, I genuinely feel like you're going to be so glad you did this for yourself. And that's kind of my thought for myself. Like, when I set my pricing, when I decide what I'm offering, it's always something that I'm like, younger me would have been like, this is life-changing.
When you connect money to it, right? Like, it becomes valuable. It becomes a service. It becomes all these things. In addition, you can always put out free content. Right? Like, it's not like nobody can afford Katie, right? Like, you're also putting out content on your podcast, on Instagram, that sort of thing. This is for a community, for people. This is the heart-led coaching we're talking about. This is amazing. I love it so much. Also, if we are measured by anything, which I don't love societal measurements, but if you are measured by anything, the success of a group is how long the group stays together after. And the fact that you have people that are still together in 2022, for instance, I've been in coaching things. I've been in seminars. I've gone to workshops. I have been in things that I am still very active in that community, or I've taken one best friend out of it, or one mentor, or that made it all worth it. It might not be that I'm doing the same thing that I was or needed it for, but I got my best friend out of it. I got my business mentor out of it. I got a group of women that I can like shoot an email to and be like, hey, can you be like this guinea pig for me? And those come out of things like this that you just don't know that you don't know you'll get that until you're in it and you take the leap, because it is scary to come into group things. You don't know if like everybody's going to be weird in the group, or you don't know that you're not going to get a whiny person in the group that's like, well, what if this happens? And what if this? I mean, like, you just don't know, but you can leave, right? Like, you can pay the money and you can also leave.
You know what's amazing, Katie, is that I don't have those women in my groups. I really, really don't. And I think one of the hardest parts of facilitating groups is managing when you get like a Debbie Downer, someone in the group that, but I think the reason why is that people find me through my podcast. I'm not super active on social media. I send out emails, and then I have my podcast. And I think on my podcast, I talk enough about mindset, and I think I probably repel the Debbie Downers. They're not going to join the group.
I don't have people like that either anymore. Yeah. I just don't attract people like that anymore. I don't attract people that I have to like cut out anymore. I know who my person is, and there's other people for you if I'm not for you. And unfortunately, in your case, there's probably not that many people out there. But I mean, it sounds like the people that are in this kind of situation are also just don't have that bone. Right? Like, they're already coming up against so much. They've already made the mindset shift.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty significant mindset shift.
I think that's true.
Yeah. I want you to tell my listeners where they can find you. Give me all the down and dirty. How can people get into this? Like, if there are other resources out there, if somebody's, just give me all the things.
Yeah, I would love to kind of tell you like a little bit more about the evolution of like the things that I offer, because everything has kind of come from, like I said, I was doing the group coaching and I could see what people really need is just this like container to connect. And then I was doing that and I had kind of a critical mass. I think it was around the time I had worked with like around 150 women in those groups.
That is a crazy amount of women.
Yeah. I mean, it's about double that now. But at the time, I decided to put out just a Google form, like a survey, to gather some information about what else women were interested in, like what other things I could offer to the community. And I had a lot of like rating scales and things like that, but I had one open-ended question that went to, 150 women. And I think the question was something along the lines of, if I could offer anything else, like sky's the limit, what could the single greatest choice, which is my business, offer that would ease this path for you? And over and over and over again in person. And they would say, I know it's not possible, but I'd love to meet women in person. I know like it would just be so hard, but what if we could meet in person? And so one of the things that I've done just kind of along the way, this was nothing structured and it's not it's not paid or anything like that, is I just was holding in my mind who like, okay, this girl lives in San Francisco and so does this girl and they need to connect, or she's using an egg donor and she's using an egg donor and let's connect them. And so I was constantly trying to connect women, which I think is a huge strength of mine, but it just got too big. And so I created a directory where women can just opt in with their information and go onto the directory, and it's organized by time zone. So you can go in and like just try to find people who live geographically.
Genius.
But the other thing was I read the results of that survey and I kind of sat with it and I thought, okay, if in person was going to happen, like I'm not in every city. I can't do like, other than in Austin where I live, like I don't know that I could really do that, but like how could I do it and where could I do it? And I decided I was going to do retreats. And so,
My God.
so
Oh my God, it's so exciting.
in a year. I did 4 retreats in a year. It was wild.
Oh my God. Whoa.
I also had a full-time job. So this was all a side hustle. I had a full-time
And
job
a baby.
and a toddler. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I've done 2 retreats in Mexico on the beach and then 2 in Sedona, which is awesome. And there are like crazy stories to go with all of those, and just like how aligned and the people that I met that were the exact right people at the exact right time to like make all of this happen. Like,
Of course. Yeah.
pure magic, like just total magic. And it's been amazing. My family did tell me I needed to slow my roll on the retreats because they do not want to take my toddler for a full week every quarter. So
Yeah.
so I'm just doing 1 this year. But this year I'm venturing into family travel. So I'm going to do my first trip where moms are bringing their babies, because my retreats have been women who are on the path to solo motherhood, and kind of like, most of my clients are women who are thinking about solo motherhood, and those community groups are women who are like on the path but aren't mothers yet. But now I'm starting to kind of widen the offer to women who are parenting. So we'll have our first family trip this year. And then the other piece that I opened up just recently in December is I started a membership program. One of the reasons why I thought about doing a membership is that when things hit the news, there are occasionally stories like, I don't know if you caught there was a documentary about the man with 1,000 children that was around donor conception practices, right? And then there are, just news articles and things that come out every once in a while. And I'm in all of these WhatsApp groups. I think I have like 30 something WhatsApp groups of my previous groups. And I would watch every single group posting links to the same article. Or I would see someone ask, hey, did anyone's doctor have you on this specific medical protocol? And that no one in the group would say yes, but I would know that a girl in another group could answer that question. And so I just thought there needs to be a bigger forum for this type of connection. And so I started this monthly membership, and the membership is a private coaching podcast and workbook every month, but it's also all my group coaching moved into the membership, and then 1 community building call. So that is just like, you come in, we go into breakout rooms, you just chit. I mean, it's like coffee with random people who become friends in, the span of time that you have with them. And so maybe you meet your new best friend and maybe you just like connect, and then, it's whatever. And but it's just an opportunity for women to connect with one another. And we also have a buy, sell, trade area in there. We have a resource library where women are posting like all of those articles, and it's crowdsourced. So it's not just me putting resources, like they are putting the resources in.
Oh my God, Katie, this is insane. It's so
wonderful.
good.
So, and it's only my 2nd month to do it, but I think it's going to create the kind of base consistent salary that I need to fully quit my job. Because at this point, in July, I went.
That was going to be my next question. Like, have you not quit your full-time job yet?
I went to part-time in July, and it's been really, really great, but I'm dying to quit fully, but I still get all my healthcare benefits and everything through that job. So
sure. I get it. Yeah. And you're single income. So, oh my God. I mean, yes, please come to my group so we can like pick your brain about all this. This is amazing.
Thank you.
I hope you are. I always say this with like the caveat, it's never meant to be condescending, but like, I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm just so proud to know people like this that have taken some obstacle and just like fucking made it their way. Like, just on down the road, downrange, we're going for it. It's going to be amazing. And it never looked that way. It just really never looked that way until you switched your mindset.
Totally receive that. And I cannot believe this is my life. From the women that I've met and the friendships that I've created, and my son, we haven't talked about him, but he is amazing. And I'm so glad that I don't ever have to worry about there are no compromises in the way that I'm parenting him. I don't ever have to worry about like custody and like none of that. And the lifestyle that I've created for myself. I'm making more money than I was when I was a school district employee. But also before I joined this call with you, Katie, I went to the gym and Trader Joe's this morning on a Friday.
I know, right? The freedom.
Yes.
The freedom around it. And
yes,
there are ways to not do it freely, right? Like,
right.
I work with a lot of people like, no, entrepreneurship is supposed to be freeing. You're not supposed to be shackled. Like, how can we get out of that? And so it sounds like you're doing it right already. Like, amazing. How can people find you? Like, where's the best place to go? Definitely share your podcast. We're going to put this all in the show notes. We'll put all the links in there, but I'm imagining that this is going to resonate with more than one person here. So are you working with people one-on-one? Are you working only in group coaching? How do people sign up for the membership? Go.
Yeah, it's super easy. It's all at singlegreatestchoice.com. And it'll, under services, you'll see all the different things that I offer. But I have the membership. I do the community groups about every 6 weeks. And then I do one-on-one coaching as well. My only retreat for the year is sold out, but I will have family travel coming up probably in August of 2025. So
I love it so much. This is so great.
And my podcast and Instagram are also Single Greatest Choice. So it's all the same.
Okay.
Single Greatest Choice.
We're going to put all that in there. Thank you so much for coming on here. I was so excited to talk to you from a business standpoint, because like you're fucking rocking it, but also like that actually I can moment, right? Like that one thing that you were just like, fuck this. Actually, I can totally do this. And I'm just so happy to have met you, and I can't wait to collaborate or do all the things with you. So I'm really excited to have met you, and I appreciate you coming on here, and we will talk so soon.
Yeah, me too. And I would love to tell you just one more little thing.
Yes,
so
please.
Throughout all of the mess of kind of sorting through, I don't want this to be my life. I can't believe I ended up here. I have been a journaler off and on for most of my life. And I picked up, I think it was Gabby Bernstein. I picked up this phrase that I would sometimes sign at the end of my journal entries. And the phrase is this or something better for the highest good. And so I would write about how badly I wanted a partner and how badly I wanted a family. And then I would sign it that, and I couldn't imagine that there was something better, something greater, something that would serve. Like to me, that was just it. I just want to be a mom. I just want to be partnered. I just want to have the white picket fence. Like I want what other people seem to have so easily. And it is so incredible to look back and just see like, this is it. This is the something better for the higher good. Like, absolutely. I am so happy and so fulfilled. My son is so happy. And there are hundreds of women I have women tell me this child that I'm holding would not be in my arms if I hadn't found your community. And I just can't think of like anything better.
You're just making the world a better place. That's all we hope for. It's like,
I'm
just
so honored
to do
the
thing
that I found. And by the way, I found it at 40. Like I found all of this right as I was turning 40. I'm 43 now. I'm planning to have another kid. I'm planning to like blow up the scene with my business. Like it is all happening, and it's going to happen in my 40s and my 50s and my 60s. Like it's not too late. You're not behind.
You're not behind.
No,
you're not behind. I'm 46 and I just started this shit too. And I love it. Yeah. It took me a long time to get here. I think we just need to be patient. That's hard to tell people. So
lovely.
Thank you so much, Katie. All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed diving deep into the world of living authentically with me. Before you go, don't forget to connect with me on Instagram. Shoot me a message at Katie Rip. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode and connect with you further. And remember, if you want more details on today's episode or just want to explore more about designing your life unapologetically, head on over to my website at katierip.com. There, you'll find all the juicy details and resources you need to keep the inspiration flowing. Lastly, if you'd like to join me on the show, whether it's to tell about your experience of designing your own life, to share your expertise, or if you'd like to participate in lifestyle coaching live on air, don't hesitate to reach out. Your story could inspire countless others on their own path to living authentically. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep living boldly, designing your life, and remember, #actually I can.